Snowlight. The first thing the mountain gives you is a different clock. Minutes lengthen into weather, hours arrive as light. I got off the shuttle at the base lodge with a duffel on my shoulder and a rented pair of skis under my arm, pretending I remembered which end mattered. The sign over the entrance said, "Welcome back to Silver Vale," in a font that had practiced optimism. Snow fell in the kind of flakes that look individually handcrafted. The air tasted clean enough to forgive you for whatever you were trying to leave. I wasn't here for the skiing. A magazine had sent me to write about the resort's grand reopening new gondola, new eco-cabins, new chef who could make a carrot reconsider its options. I took the assignment because sometimes the only way to change the subject with yourself is to change your altitude. Inside, the lobby fire performed confidence. Families queued for lift tickets in coats the color of candy. A group of college kids tried on bravery near the Black Diamond Trail map. I stood to one side watching the glass fog and clear. That old trick of the mountain, a view can arrive or vanish depending on what you decide to breathe. Daniel? Her voice had the same cool clarity I remembered from a decade ago. A bell rung in winter. I turned. Lila stood 6 feet away in a Navy instructor jacket, her hair tucked into a beanie, eyes the hard blue of shaded snow. I hadn't seen her in 7 years. We left each other like you leave a house after a fire, walking through rooms that are technically still there, and knowing the form no longer means anything. "Hi," I said, and then because I couldn't stop it, "You cut your hair." She smiled with her mouth, not her eyes. "You grew a beard." "It's seasonal," I said, "like oranges or regret." That got a real smile. She gestured toward the window, where the gondola line crept through the trees like a long thought. "You're here to write about the reopening," she said. "Magazines have to pretend mountains are news." "You're teaching here?" I asked. "Head of instruction," she said, "and sometimes chief finder of lost mittens. It's a small kingdom, but I like the weather. If you had told me back then that we'd meet again in a ski lodge, we would have laughed. We were city people with favorite crosswalks and a calendar we called life. We had worshipped late-night diners and the precise way cardboard coffee cups warm your hands. We were built for subways and arguments and good bagels. Mountains were the kind of place we promised each other we'd go, and then didn't because promises are also a place. "Do you have time for coffee?" she asked. "Always," I said, because the kind of bravery I could manage that morning came with a lid. We took a corner table. The windows made a theater of the slope. Small children in puffy courage zigzagged across the beginner hill, their instructors skiing backward like magicians. Lila wrapped her fingers around a paper cup and looked at them, the way people look at languages they didn't realize they still speak. "How long have you been here?" I asked. 3 winters, she said. "And the summers that decided to be beautiful? You?" "Still writing," I said. "Still editing whatever I can make sound like a sentence. I moved apartments twice without actually moving on." She nodded without pity. "Silver Vale was empty for years," she said. "Closed after the big storm. The new owners found a way to reopen without lying about the mountain. Is that possible?" "It's necessary," she said. "The rest is weather." We talked about small things because the large ones were still deciding whether to pledge allegiance. How the gondola cabins looked like lanterns when the sun quit early. How the chef made soup that convinced you he'd interviewed every carrot personally. How the moon here seemed closer because your excuses were running out of air. When our cups were empty, she stood. "I have a beginner class," she said. "Adults at noon. Egos and ankles. You could join. It's like learning to write again with better verbs." "I might," I said, "if my insurance loves me." She took a step, then turned back. "There's a night tour up to the ridge with headlamps," she said. "We stop at the warming hut. The stars pretend to solve everything. If you want a sentence for your article, that's a good one." "Do you guide it?" "Sometimes," she said. "Sometimes I stay and watch the lights come down the mountain, like people remembering how to return." After she left, the mountain resumed being the most honest thing in the room. I saw her again an hour later on the snow, voice patient as she coaxed 3 adults into trusting angles. The class stood in a crooked line like punctuation marks. She moved among them, rewriting fear. When one man tilted too far downhill, she touched his glove and said, "Let the slope do its half. You do yours." He exhaled relief he didn't know he'd been holding. She had always been good at that, locating tension and teaching it a better job. Around 3, a gray band of weather unrolled itself across the ridge. The resort's app pinged everyone's phones with a polite alert. Light snow through evening. Wind above tree line after dusk. Night skiing remains open. I wrote the kind of notes editors respect. Lift capacity, wind patterns, the engineering of the new gondola grips, all the little nouns that make copy sound like it has a spine. Then I walked, past the rental shop that smelled like old victories, past the patroller hut with its Red Cross defiance, past the sign with the trail ratings as if difficulty were a number you could negotiate down with charm. At the base of the old lift, the one Silver Veil had retired after the storm, I stopped. The chairs hung silent, webbed with snow like forgotten thoughts. A patroller named Jonas leaned on the gate, eating a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. "Used to ride that to the ridge," he said when he saw me staring. "Back when the mountain liked us less." "It likes us now?" "It tolerates," he said, "like a landlord." "Did you work here the winter it closed?" "I did," he said. "Lost a friend in the slide. We don't build shrines because the mountain doesn't like being told what to remember. We just say his name sometimes when the wind is polite." "What's his name?" I asked. "Evan," he said. "Thanks for asking." I walked until my phone announced battery sorrow. Back at the lodge, the sky had turned a kind of blue that makes you imagine God owns a dimmer switch. Lila was off shift and halfway out of her jacket when I found her near the staff lockers. "You still float when you walk," I said, meaning it the way a person means you have kept something good. "You still narrate," she said and laughed. "About that night tour," I said, "do you think the wind is an opinion or a fact?" "It's an invitation," she said, "but I have to stay. The gondola's new, which means it wants to prove it can behave. We run slow in wind." She hesitated. "Come by the control room at 9. You can see the mountain breathe." At 9, the mountain was a cathedral and the wind, the choir. The gondola cabins moved with deliberate grace, little rooms practicing patience. The control room looked like an overly ambitious submarine. Panels, screens, a wall of monitors showing the line, the terminals, the motor bullwheel turning like steady thought. Lila stood with a headset around her neck, watching a live feed of the ridge where headlamps bobbed like brave fireflies. "How do you know it's safe?" I asked. "We listen," she said. "Cables talk. The wind tells you which vocabulary it's planning to use." We watched the monitors in companionable quiet. Every 12 seconds, the system printed a timestamp on the upper left of the screen, an accounting that made it easier to pretend to trust. At 9:17, a patroller's voice cracked the radio. "Headlamps returning. Hut clear." At 9:19, another voice. "Gusts above Tower 8, maybe 30. Nothing rude." At 9:22, the lights on the ridge paused, as if the stars had told a joke only the mountain understood. "You still carry a notebook?" Lila asked. I patted my chest. "Always. It keeps me from thinking all of this is only happening in my head." "Does it work?" "Sometimes," I said. She studied me a second. "How's your mother?" she asked. "Gone," I said. 3 winters now." "I'm sorry," she said, and the words didn't sound like furniture. "How's your father?" I asked. "Better at asking for help," she said. "Worse at pretending he doesn't need it." We stood there with our old language between us, the grammar familiar and improved. The wind rattled the eaves like someone considering entry. The monitors kept their calm promise. At 9:26, the radio chirped again. "We've got a kid separated from his group above the learning hill. Name's Tyler, 9, blue jacket, green hat with a pom-pom the size of his future. Last seen near the picnic tables." Lila was already moving. "Come on," she said, tossing me a reflective vest from a hook. "You owe me 3 pairs of eyes." The search taught me more about mountains than any article ever had. How sound carries and lies, how snow records and erases, how fear learns your name quickly and starts answering to it. We fanned out with staff and volunteers, each of us with a beep of borrowed bravery clipped to our zippers. Lila cupped her hands and called gentle versions of Tyler's name. Jonas from the retired lift walked the woods line like someone negotiating with a low god. We found him 20 minutes later behind the rental shop, crying in the fierce way relief arrives harder than fear. He had taken a shortcut to the candy machine and gotten lost between intention and door. "Hey," Lila said, crouching to his height. "I hate vending machines too. They always want coins without remembering your name." He hiccup laughed despite himself. "Can you help me with a job, Tyler?" she asked. "I need you to hold my hand so I don't get lost on the way back." He nodded like he'd been hired for something that mattered. He took her glove. They walked back through the quiet, 2 headlamps, making a promise the mountain agreed to keep. After, when the family had become a single organism again, and the radio settled to oxygen, we stood under the eaves watching snow decide our hair looked better with it. "You were always good with fear," I said. "I learned from mine," she said. We went back to the control room to close the line. She turned the system to crawl, then to creep, then to stop. The bullwheel sighed and agreed. The mountain exhaled too. "Do you remember the last time we went anywhere without an agenda?" she asked, uncoiling her headset cord. "Once to the coast," I said. "We tried to build a fire and learned you can't talk driftwood into believing. We ate cold s'mores and said that counted. We were happy," she said. "We were busy," I said. "Happiness was something we thought we could afford later." She looked at me levelly. "I left in a bad way," she said. "I owe you the decency of saying that in good weather." "You left in your way," I said. "I made it into a performance because I didn't know what else to do." "I was cruel," she said, and the word didn't flinch. "You asked me to tell you why, and I told you I don't know because I was ashamed of knowing. I had made a mistake, and then another, and then a chain of them that looked like a necklace from far away." "You don't," I began. "I do," she said. "It wasn't an affair exactly. It was a friendship I kept feeding with my attention because I didn't recognize attention as the currency it is. It became something I couldn't carry. Ending us seemed like the only honest thing left. It wasn't. It was just the fastest. A decade of imagined speeches, their scripts rewritten every time I showered or crossed a street. I found none of them useful now. "Thank you," I said, "for telling me in weather like this." We stared at the monitors as if they were qualified to hold a silence. "I'm not asking for anything," she said. "I didn't bring anything to give," I said. "Then we're ahead of who we used to be," she said, and the smile reached her eyes. The snow settled into its night shift. I wrote the kind of sentences that pretend to be about places, but are really about having a body inside a story that isn't finished with you. I slept dreamless and woke to a sky that had not slept at all. The next day, Silver Vale wore its brochure face. Sun, crisp air, the kind of squeak underfoot that means the snow respects your boots. I took Lila's adult beginner class because humiliation can be a spiritual practice. She taught me how to lean without apologizing, how to pressure the inside edge without making a speech about it first. When I fell, she taught me how to get up like you meant it, which turned out to be useful outside skiing too. At lunch, the chef converted onions into religion. Lila sat with the instructor's people whose faces had learned to admire competence more than charm. I pretended to type to give my hands something to do that wasn't remembering. That afternoon at the top of the learning hill, we stood watching a row of beginners become the sentence maybe. "There's a ridge beyond the ridge," Lila said, pointing. "On a clear day, you can see the next county. On a clearer day, you can see the thing after that." "What's after that?" I asked. "Forgiveness," she said, "or the lake, depending on who's talking." "Show me," I said. "Tomorrow," she said. "The wind owes us interest." The wind did not pay. At dusk, clouds marched in a disciplined line, and the forecast upgraded itself to advisory. The resort put out hot chocolate like negotiations. Lila's phone buzzed with a staff text. "Hold night skiing. Watch gusts. Patrol sweep at 21:30. We went to the control room anyway. I wanted to watch a cable hold its nerve. Lila wanted to practice trusting things with moving parts again. Jonas came in rubbing his hands and complaining about a storm that had forgotten its appointment. He taught me the operator's superstition. Tap the wooden doorframe twice before you start the line. Lila did it without thinking. At 9:04, the wind argued. At 9:07, it apologized. At 9:12, it lied. On the monitors, the cabins swayed no more than they should. The radio told us the sweep had begun, patrollers skiing down with headlamps like commas. At 9:23, a voice on the radio. Cabin 19 is stopped between towers 7 and 8. Wind bounce, 2 passengers, calm. The operator on the other end reduced speed, then because the system sometimes listens to reason stopped. The cable settled. Protocol, Lila said. We wait for the gust to pass, then creep them home. We waited. It didn't pass. The wind had escalated from opinion to policy. Evac? Jonas asked. Not yet, Lila said, listening to the machines speak their name. They're fine. We'll bring them back when the mountain remembers we're guests. 5 minutes crept past. The radio. 19 reports a jammed latch. Cabin door flexed in gust. They're secure inside. 1 passenger anxious. I'll take the line, Lila said, and moved to the radio as if the microphone were a hand. 19, this is control. You're safe. The cabin is rated for winds higher than this. We see you. We're with you. On 3, we'll nudge the line. You'll feel motion like a memory. Ready? 1, 2. The cable woke. The cabin moved half a cabin length and held. The wind shoved, reconsidered, sulked. In the monitor, the inside of cabin 19 came into view. A man with a beard holding the hand of a woman in a red scarf. He was talking gently. She was breathing like someone remembering how. Tell her to count the lights in the valley, Lila said into the radio. Odd numbers are best. Tell her that every light is a kitchen where someone forgot to buy milk and they're still going to make tea anyway. The cabin drifted. The line began to creep. The wind lost an argument, then another. Almost home, Jonas said. Not yet, Lila said. 5 minutes later, 19 eased into the terminal like a thought concluding itself. The door opened. The couple who had been practicing calm stepped onto the platform, carrying the kind of gratitude that makes you want to learn a new language, just to say it right. The woman looked at us and cried a polite amount. The man shook Jonas's hand like a ritual. Lila said, "Welcome back," as if she always meant it. She turned to me. "You okay?" she asked. "I think I just forgave metal," I said. We closed the line for the night and let the mountain be. Outside, snow made soundless arguments with itself. The valley lights kept their promise. On my last morning, Silver Vale wore sun like a borrowed scarf. Lila and I rode the new gondola to the ridge. Cabin light blurred around us. The valley spread like a map, learning humility. We didn't talk much. That was the point. At the top, we stepped out into a sky so clean it made other skies seem like lies. The ridge trail rolled away in a soft white sentence. To the west, the next county. Beyond that, the thing after that. We stood at the fence where the patrollers had mounted a small plaque, with no name, only a line. Say it out loud. The wind did not object. We said a few things out loud, Evan's name. A thank you for Tyler's candy machine misadventure. The unheroic truths of our old marriage. The names of the streets we used to love, and the cafes that had closed, and the nights when we had mistaken exhaustion for character. We said them without negotiating for applause. "I'm selling my apartment," she said. "The studio above the bike shop. It's time to live where my boots belong." "Nusho, you'll stay here?" "For a while," she said. "Long enough to stop counting." "I could visit," I said, immediately embarrassed by the kidness of it. "You could," she said, "but not as a project, not as a fix, as a person who knows how to sit near a window without teaching it what to show." "You could visit the city," I said. "We could hate the subway together again." "We could," she said, smiling. "The city still owes me one opposite of a quiet night." We skied down the way Lila taught, letting the mountain do its half, doing ours. At the bottom, we returned our borrowed noun skis, poles, time, and went to the bistro where the chef had convinced onions to become mercy. We ordered soup. We let steam make its argument for staying alive. "I don't think we're the people who make another try," she said. "I think we're the people who made one good beginning, one true ending, and one friendship that didn't understand it was waiting for both." "I think you're right," I said, "and I think I'm grateful in a way that isn't hungry." We walked to the shuttle stop. Snow fell with the good manners of a guest who knows when to take their leave. The bus idled. I put down my bag and we stood there in what used to be a place we were bad at, the present. She took the red scarf from her pocket and tied it around my wrist. Not tightly, just enough to teach my skin the temperature of a decision. "For the train," she said. They're always too cold. What about you? I asked. I have another, she said, and I'm learning to like the wind on my neck again. I wanted to say something movie-worthy. Instead, I said the sentence that felt like a plain wooden chair. Thank you for meeting me at the mountain we didn't know we needed. Thank you for letting it be the mountain, she said, and not a stage. The shuttle door sighed. I climbed the steps, sat, and watched her through the window while the driver counted us like blessings. She lifted a hand. I lifted mine. The bus pulled away, the mountain obligingly refusing to chase. Back in the city that night, the streetlights were as brave as they had always been. I hung the red scarf by my door and wrote the article editors could print. Gondola speed, snowmaking practice, the chef's argument for carrots, the eco-cabins that face the trees like students. Then I wrote the ending they couldn't, that sometimes the mountain doesn't fix you. It gives you a bigger silence so you can hear yourself tell the truth. A week later, an envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a photograph taken from the ridge. The valley lights were small, the sky something you could believe in. On the back, in Lila's careful hand, let the slope do its half, you do yours. L. I pinned it above my desk beside a list that has kept me honest. Fixable. How I apologize. How I listen. How I stand still. Not fixable. The past. The weather. The speed of other people's healing. When winter returns, I'll go back to Silvervale. Not to see whether anything changed, but to practice remembering. I'll ride the gondola and count the towers like beads. Tap the wooden door frame twice just in case. And say a name out loud when the wind is polite. I'll stand beside a fence that pretends to protect you from falling and protect myself from pretending I don't need fences. And if I catch a glimpse of an instructor in a navy jacket skiing backward, teaching courage to a crooked line of beginners, I'll leave her to the mountain and the mountain to her. I'll warm my hands on the soup bowl and let the window choose its weather. The clock up there runs different. It doesn't make you younger. It makes you more honest about the age you've earned. And on good days, when the air is clear and the ridge shows you the thing after the thing after the thing, you can see as far as the part of your life where you did your half and the world did its, and you didn't mistake either for a favor. That's enough. That's the ending. And it holds.